A few days ago, Swift made an announcement that they were going to be working with Chainlink to create a new blockchain cross-border payment system. Well, in this video, I want to give you some updated thoughts around this. I've seen some extremely interesting posts, specifically by some high-up people, including Brad Garlinghouse. And in this video, I want to talk about exactly what my updated thoughts around this really are. Guys, make sure if you enjoy these videos, smash the like button, subscribe. Still not in the office, and really appreciate all your support as I'm grinding with a little bit of a makeshift setup. So I want to start off and point out one thing. Since the Chainlink Swift news, right, we really haven't seen any movement in the Link price. Now, in my opinion, this goes to a deeper issue with the Chainlink project, which is simply that the Link token isn't really necessary to the underlying protocol. Chainlink is a decentralized oracle network, and as I talked about in my first video covering this topic, those oracles pass data back and forth. But there's no need for Chainlink in this system. In fact, you can actually use USD to pay for the Chainlink oracle network. It's a lot different than XRP, where XRP is critical utility and a necessity to the XRP ledger. And I think you can kind of see in the appreciation of Link, or the lack of appreciation, that the market kind of understands that this partnership really isn't so much any kind of benefit to the Chainlink token. It's really a benefit to the Chainlink Oracle network, which I've talked about countless times on this channel, is a very, very important Oracle network for passing data in a decentralized way from one institution to another. But that's not what the XRP ledger does, right? The XRP ledger is the internet of value. It focuses on settling value, which is much different than moving data. It's completely different use cases. And if you take a look at the price of the Chainlink token, like I mentioned before, the Chainlink token's really not moving at all or reacting to this news, because I think the market knows that this really doesn't mean much for Chainlink. Now, I'm a Chainlink holder myself. I hold the Link token. It was more of a OG buy back in the day than anything else. But for me, it's just one of those things where, like, yeah, it's exciting. Institutions are stepping in, but it doesn't seem to really be doing much for the Link token overall. Now, with that said, I want to come into something else that I believe is very important, and that is Swift working with Ripple, not working with Ripple, whatever. I saw a very interesting post around this, and I couldn't agree more. The fact that Swift is just getting started on a blockchain payment system now, they're 13 years behind Ripple. And I know you probably are thinking, well, it's Swift. They have all these partnerships. They have X, Y, and Z. Like, they'll figure it out. Guys, I think one of the best examples of this of all time is actually Tesla, a company that I actually made a lot of money in, a company that I was doing a lot of this stuff with before I got into XRP and saw potentially an even bigger upside investment than I saw in Tesla. And that thing is that when Tesla first got started, they had a huge head start on the rest of the industry. But everyone always said the competition's coming, the competition's coming, the competition is about to get here, get ready. Ford is about to come out with their electric vehicle. This company is about to come out with their electric vehicle. And guess what? It never happened, and it never happened, and it never happened. And by the time it came out, right, it just wasn't really working. These companies weren't good at creating electric vehicles. They were good at creating gas vehicles. And guess what? Electric vehicles are completely different. So they just weren't able to compete with Tesla at that level. And now by the time where these companies are producing, I guess you could say, decent electric vehicles or decent EVs, well, guess what? It doesn't really matter at this point because Tesla's so big, they're not going anywhere. And I think you're going to see a very similar thing between Swift and Ripple. I think it could not be more obvious that Ripple has a huge head start on Swift. I think it could not be more obvious that Swift really doesn't understand blockchain. They don't really understand crypto. You can see that in the post they put out. And they're not going to be able to get the engineering talent that an XRP or a Ripple would be able to get. And that's going to be a huge issue moving forward. Ripple is always going to attract the brightest, the best, the smartest talent, and they're going to continue to have a gap in comparison to the rest of the industry. And for someone like Swift, starting out in the 2013 era of what XRP is, it's going to be really hard for them to catch up. And let's face it, Swift can't create a decentralized blockchain, right? That's not something they're going to be capable of doing. They might have a centralized ledger of some sort, but guess what? That's not competition for XRP. It's completely different. The best part about XRP is there's no boss. There's no central governing authority. And David Schwartz once said this, and I thought it was maybe one of the most important things he said. He said he believes large financial institutions are not going to want to give up control. I think we all know that, and I think that's all fairly obvious. But only so much of those large financial institutions actually have control. In fact, the vast majority of them don't have any control. So what does that mean? That means it's probably better for all of them, including all the smaller ones who will never have control, to pick a system with no boss rather than a single boss. And for them, that's a decentralized network. Rather than trusting your competitors to make the rules for you, trust a decentralized open code. Trust the fact that you don't have to rely on one single counterparty in order to do your business. That's where the XRP ledger is always going to be differentiated. And honestly, that's where all the most important innovation has been happening in the cryptocurrency sector. BlackRock actually came out and said a couple months ago, we've seen a lot of public chains and we've seen a lot of private chains. And what they came out and said was the private chains have, quite frankly, been a failure. There really hasn't been anything good to come out of any private chain. Yes, they can be good and useful internally, but they themselves had said that all the innovation and all the important things are happening on the public blockchains. What Swift is doing is they are going out and starting fresh, right? Competing with R3, competing with these private blockchain companies, and starting out fresh and saying, you know what, we're going to get in the private blockchain race. Well, that's great, but yes, you have the partnerships, yes, you have this network, but are you actually going to create a good product? My understanding is the Swift product has sucked the entire time it's existed. Why? They're suddenly going to get blockchain right? They're suddenly going to get a whole bunch of really good engineers who are going to understand this and create some really good product? I don't really think so. What Chainlink is doing, in my opinion, for Swift is going to be really useful and really important. It's going to bring a lot of good data feeds there. But it doesn't use the Link token, and therefore the Link token is not really reacting to the news because it's like, all right, this is good for the Oracle network, but you don't really need the Link token for it, so it's like, whatever. This is really good for Swift, I think, over the long run in terms of innovating and bringing more attention to blockchain technology. But are they going to be able to compete? I think they'll try. I think it'll be a similar situation to Ford competing with Tesla on EVs, but I don't think they're really going to have it in their DNA in order to do the hard, important things. No one thinks these private chains are really going to be much of anything other than an internal database tracker, which is very useful, but it's not the same magnitude as a global internet of value. The reason the internet is so important and was so transformational was because it was open and decentralized. You didn't have one single controller of the internet. And that has been one of the most important and useful things to ever happen to society as we know it. But the internet was lacking one really important thing, and that was a value transfer protocol, a way to move money from point A to point B over the internet. It was really just a layer of information. What cryptocurrency technology does is adds that layer, adds that value layer to move across the internet. But you can't suddenly start walled gardening these payment systems, right? Because it's the same exact reason why private versions of the internet never caught off. What people wanted was a public version, something that they couldn't be repressed on, something they couldn't be censored or monitored on. And that's how we got the internet as we know it today. Yes, there are other layers on top of the internet that are abstracted, that are centralized, absolutely. But it's all built on the decentralized information sharing protocol. This is what we are going to see in the blockchain world. And what Swift is lining up is nothing more than, in my opinion, an internal business, tool. It's nothing more than something for Swift to utilize to hopefully make their systems better. But that's not going to even come close to the same amount of magnitude as something like an XRP and what Ripple is doing with it. It's a very different setup. It goes to the core architecture and the thought process behind how these chains work. And if you're asking yourself, well, why would Swift go down this road for something that's not really working or not really useful? Well, it just goes back to the idea that they just got started on blockchain, right? They're new. I think a lot of people in this space look at themselves as, oh, well, these institutions must know more than me. I think you have to take a step back and understand that a lot of them have just blown this thing off forever. Said it's not even something we're going to look at. I've talked to institutions that didn't even know blockchains could go 24/7. They said, well, how do we move this stuff on the weekend? It's like, well, the protocol does it itself. You don't even need someone to help you move it. And they were like astonished by that. And guys, it's just because for the longest time, right, when you're dealing with trillions and trillions and quadrillions of dollars, right, you're not paying attention to this new small little thing popping up. But then by the time they're paying attention to it, and by the time they see like, oh shoot, we should have been paying attention to it, it's very possibly too late. And that's exactly what we saw with Tesla. And in my opinion, the exact same thing is going to happen with Ripple in comparison to Swift. XRP is just in such a better, long-standing, trusted position than whatever chain or whatever system Swift is going to try to spin up, which in my opinion is nothing more than all the failed projects we've seen before in the past in terms of JP Morgan's ledger, in terms of R3's private ledger. These things that just never seem to catch on. And what's the reason? If I'm Bank of America, if I'm XYZ, why am I going to opt into someone else's system? Blockchain essentially makes it all free to do. All I want is a system that has liquidity, that I can trust, and that no one else can take control of. That's something that Swift will never be able to create. And that's what's differentiated with the XRP ledger, and in my opinion, is something that no one else is going to be able to catch up to. Guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update. And for now, Mickle out.